Gedenk. Gedenk, was es hat getan mit dein Volk, der deutsche Nazi Amalek. Gedenk die 6 Millionen Juden, was seien umgekommen al Kiddush Hashem. Gedenk Treblinka. Gedenk Auschwitz. Gedenk Buchenwald. Gedenk Majdanek. Gedenk Sobibor. Gedenk die Gaskammern und die Krematoriums. Gedenk die 6 Millionen.
Jiskadal ve Jiskadash. Wieviel seien schon nicht da, soll geheiligt sein die Schau. Milbau weinen Zion rasch, Jiskadal ve Jiskadash. Was verblieben ist uns mehr wie die durchgeglitterte Rehr. Auf dem Quorum, auf dem Asch, Jiskadal ve Jiskadash.
Let us remember our brothers and sisters, the homes and schools, the streets and the cities, the Jewish inn by the roadway, the old man with the beard, the mother in her shawl, the girl with her plates and the toddlers, the thousands of Jewish communities and their families, and the whole Jewish people which was slaughtered on Europe's soil by the Nazi beast.
Let us remember the mother who clutched her child to her breast and fell with it, the babe whose fingers felt for its mother's nipple but found it cold, the legs which sought refuge but found no place to flee.
Let us remember those pure of heart and bright-eyed ones who sacrificed themselves, yet could not help.
Let us remember the day full of light, the sun which gazed down on the bloody scaffold, the clear blue sky which saw but was silent, and the hills of ash beneath the blossoming gardens. Let the living remember their dead, for they are before us. Their eyes gaze at us and demand remembrance.
Zecher von die Teute Kedoshim mir schweigen a Minut. In der Stillkeit hör ich räuschen und sieden sehr Blut. Ich fühl a Wind, a kalten Wohen und Herr geheime Tritt. O Zet, die Teute gehen rein in unser Mit. Sie gehen schon von alle Wegen, wie groß ist sehr Zoll. Ich starb in Ott, der eine Rege, schon 6 Millionen Mal. Und sie leben euch gleich wieder, euch 6 Millionen Mal. Die Schwestern meine und die Brüder von tiefen Beiner Tal. Sie stellen sich weg von vorn, von hinten, rechts und links. Gefangen seien mir geworden von dunklen Teutenring.
Der Ring nimmt enger nach sich schmieden, wir können nicht daraus. Wer lebt bei emes von die Jiden und wer ist Schadenbläus? Die Teute seien mehr nicht Schadens, vergast in größer Pein. Sie atmen mit unser Atem, was wir es halten ein. Sie suchen, gucken sich besonder in jeden Panem ein. Oh, hat wer gefunden, was Wunder, a keure wer, a Freund. Der Raubgift findet schon donnisch keinen, von allem nannte mehr. Was soll gedenken, sie beweinen, am Mose mit der Träer. Sie bei der Welt ne Commemoration, war sehr heilig Blut. Sie alle, lassen wir jetzt der Mannen in der Gedenkminute.
Wiffel seinen scheuen nicht da.
Tonight, we stand here together on the 82nd anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. We gather to honour and remember those who, despite immeasurable oppression and suffering, rose up and resisted.
We began tonight by reading Gedenk, whose final line echoes Gedenk die 6 Millionen, remember the 6 million. Yet, immediately following this, in Kaddish, we hear the powerful question, Wiffel seinen scheuen nicht da? How many are no longer here? As if we could not truly understand or recall what we had just been told. We are starkly reminded that the horrors of the Churban are not something that can be quantified with just a number, nor something that can be merely mentioned and forgotten once again. We are reminded to speak up with urgent purpose, commanded to think, memorialise and educate over and over again. It is not enough to intellectually know. We must viscerally never forget. It is not enough to just ask how many, but also who. To remember the murdered individuals who live on only in photographs, memories, community records, and families. To remember that every victim had a name.
This year, we draw our focus to women of the Holocaust. It is important to honour the women, Bundisten and Skifisten, who played vital roles in both cultural and armed resistance. Patti Kremer was a loyal and devoted Bundistke. She was central to the underground cultural movement in the Vilna Ghetto, leading forbidden readings and maintaining legal Jewish libraries. She understood the importance of culture and maintaining identity. Her courage and commitment to das Jiddische Volk was legendary. Her refusal to be lebendig begraben inspiring. Passionate until the end, eyewitnesses reported that Kremer encouraged them to sing Die Schwur on the way to their death after the ghetto's liquidation and their transport to Sobibor extermination camp.
Women also participated in active battle and resistance. Hirschglick's song, Still die Nacht, illustrates the gallantry of Witka Kempner, a young partisan. Fatol, von Walderreus gekrochen, mit Schneegirlanden auf die Hohe, gemutigt von kleinen Nitzochen, vor unser nahem, freien Door. She crawls out of the forest, snowflakes sparkling in her hair, to blow up a Nazi convoy, fighting for a new, free generation.
Heroines like Levin Mire taught children in secret, fully knowing the consequences if she was discovered, and knowing that discovery was almost inevitable. And yet, she insisted on teaching her children, to bring them even momentary respite, and to offer them a belief they would have a future.
Tonight, Wiffel seinen scheuen nicht da. In 2025, 80 years since the end of the war, we sadly ask how many survivors are no longer here with us. Each year, the war becomes more and more distant, and there are fewer people who can bear first-hand witness.
This year, we remember an important member of our community, Sesha Goldberg. Born in Lodz in 1929, Sesha was only 10 years old when the war broke out. Despite being forced into the ghetto and then later Auschwitz-Birkenau, Sesha miraculously survived the war. Dedicated to our Kehillah and Mishpacha, our family and community, Sesha ran the Wednesday Club Akdima for 30 years and dedicated much of her time to Holocaust education and remembrance.
Soon, there will be no more survivors to tell their stories, no more first-hand accounts to rely on. Now, more than ever, the words of Shimon Dubnov resonate. Jeden schreibt und verschreibt. Jews, write and record. It is our responsibility, our duty, to ensure the survival of the stories of our people. It is up to remember, to carry on the legacy, to educate ourselves and to educate others.
Holocaust education is intrinsic to our SCIF pedagogy. Chub and Tog is one of our most important days each summer camp, and it is notable that it has been a fixture for generations. It is vital that this education continues. It is the key to ensuring our precious survivors' stories are remembered, retold, and that memories are preserved and enshrined. Last summer camp, our Chub and Tog theme was the Bund and SCIF during the Chubim. Lageristen learned how our organisations and members survived and resisted, both culturally and in battle.
6 million Jews died, but the Jewish people live on. The Bund and SCIF did not die. Our culture did not die. Our traditions continue. Here in Australia, we continue to speak Yiddish, educate children, and live by the tenets of Chavashaft, Yiddishkeit, and Doigkeit. It is these customs that connect us to every SCIFist who has been part of our movement over the past century, and all those who will come after. It is our golden Ekate. To the SCIFisten here tonight, past and present, we must learn to channel the strength and bravery of the SCIFisten in the Warsaw Ghetto who fought to survive. Many were just teenagers like us. Today, in a world so full of hatred, apathy, and disinformation, we should take inspiration from them, from their courage and determination to face challenges, maintain hope, and look towards building a schönere und bessere Welt.
Education is the most important thing, sharing stories with our children and our wider community. We are honoured tonight to be joined by Dr. Stephen Cook, CEO of the Melbourne Holocaust Museum, whose vital work ensures that the stories of the Chubim continue to be remembered and shared to future generations.
Wiffel seien schon nicht da. The number of people who are no longer here is incomprehensible, but our final line tonight will be Wir seien da. We are here.
Kaved sehr lichtigen Andenk.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the privilege of being asked to speak to you this evening. I was thinking about what I could say that might be appropriate on such an important occasion. And I was reflecting that growing up in the UK, those of my age who aren't Jewish heard very little about the Holocaust, let alone the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. We didn't learn about it at school. There were no museums. And what memorials there were either in Jewish synagogues or cemeteries or in out-of-the-way places. Commemorations about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising were held annually, organised by the Board of Deputies of British Jews, but the perception was that the Holocaust was someone else's story. This was summed up by the literary critic George Steiner when reviewing the English translation of Primo Levi's The Drowned and the Saved in 1988. He commented that no ash from the chimneys at Treblinka floated on an English wind. The Holocaust, he thought, was seen as not our patch. Steiner was speaking about the distancing of the Holocaust from the history and the geography of British national identity. In this distancing, the Holocaust happened over there, back then. It happened on a diseased continent and had little to do with plucky little Britain, England, standing alone against insurmountable odds. Comforting national mythologies that allow us to ignore uncomfortable questions. And I believe it's the role of museums and memorials to unsettle. And although there would be temporary exhibitions in the UK to the Holocaust, it wouldn't be until 1995 for Britain to have its first permanent museum dedicated to the Holocaust. And I would still argue that much Holocaust commemoration, particularly in the UK, fails to ask these difficult questions, fails to unsettle. Compared to the UK, for Australia the situation is somewhat different. The Bund have been holding this commemoration of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising on the 19th of April, whatever else happens to coincide with on this date, for 8 decades. And it's part of a long history of commemorating the Holocaust in Australia, and specifically the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It involves formal commemorations, it includes testimonies, the first book of which was published in Melbourne in Yiddish in 1948, and includes temporary exhibitions. Indeed, the first temporary exhibition with the title Warsaw Ghetto Revolt, Destruction and Resistance was held in the Kadima, then on Leiden Street, in 1953. Bono Wiener and Sender Burstin, familiar names, were both involved in organising that exhibition that was both in English and Yiddish. The exhibition documented pre-war Jewish life, the formation of the ghettos, the labour in the extermination camps, as well as the uprising. 7 years later, in 1960, in the context of a mass communal rally at the Melbourne Town Hall to protest against rising anti-Semitism in 1960, the then Victorian Jewish Board of Deputies, through discussions with the Warsaw Jewish Centre, decided to organise an exhibition timed to coincide with the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising commemoration the following year. Bono Wiener was again involved as convener of the committee, and 6,000 people visited the exhibition at the Melbourne Town Hall. A further temporary exhibition was held in 1980, Bono gave his testimony, and then in 1984 the Jewish Holocaust Centre was established, with Bono, Mina Fig and Aaron Sokolovich celebrated as the founders. Holocaust survivors have therefore been central to the long history of Holocaust commemoration here, one of the many differences between Britain and Australia. So we know there's been significant amounts of speaking, writing, commemorating and exhibition making in Australia since before the end of the Second World War. And that's despite, and to misquote George Steiner, no ash from the chimneys of Treblinka floated on an Australian wind. So why do we need to remember the Holocaust here? As well as the injunction to never forget, how might remembering the Holocaust here help us unsettle our taken for granted assumptions about the world? And I'm speaking to people who are very well aware of these connections, but I'm asking for education and advocacy. Because this is all the more important because few in the Australian general population know about Australia's connections to the Holocaust. Still too often, the Holocaust is often seen as something that happened over there and back then. And we need to remember the Holocaust here because at the Evian conference called by US President Roosevelt in July 1938 to discuss the Jewish refugee crisis caused by Nazi persecution, Australia, like many other nations, took a restrictive stance on accepting Jewish refugees. Our representative, Lieutenant Colonel T.W. White, declared, Australia does not have a racial problem and is not desirous of importing one. At that time, Indigenous Australians faced systematic discrimination under assimilationist policies, including forced removal of children, the stolen generations, the denial of citizenship rights, segregation. These histories are interconnected. We need to remember the Holocaust here because William Cooper, a 77-year-old Yorta Yorta elder and Indigenous rights activist, led a protest following Kristallnacht in 1938. When news reached Australia about the Nazi attacks on Jewish businesses and synagogues in Germany, Cooper gathered members of the Australian Aborigines League and marched to the German consulate in Melbourne. The German consulate refused to accept his delegation's petition. Despite facing severe discrimination and lacking many rights in his own country, Cooper chose to stand in solidarity with persecuted others, even though on the other side of the world. Solidarity is global. We need to remember the Holocaust here because of the Glazer family. The Glazers were Viennese Jews who by the late 1930s knew that the writing was on the wall and that they needed to flee Austria. Family-assisted migration was a way out, and they knew that they had a relative in Australia whose second name was Bora, but they didn't know any other details. So they wrote to all of the people they could find with the second name Bora in Australia. And the only person who wrote back wasn't a Bora, his name was Fred Ashworth, and he owned the Bora and White Ant Extermination Company. And the letter had come to him by mistake. But he got the letter translated and, moved by the family's flight, used his connections to get the Glazers out of Vienna, and then found a new home in Australia. Fred took action. We need to remember the Holocaust here because of Marley Cohen and Argolds Frickson. Marley lived with her family in Libau, Latvia, a life that was devastated by the German invasion. Mali survived the war, but almost the entirety of the Jewish community were murdered by the Nazis and Latvian collaborators. The largest massacre was at the nearby sand dunes, the beach. One of these alleged collaborators was Arguds Fuchsum. Both Mali and, unbeknownst to her, Arguds migrated to Australia after the war. Later in life, Mali would find out that Arguds, the person she held accountable for the murder of her father, was living a short taxi ride away from her in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. In her testimonies that my friend and colleague Donna Fries and I have studied, Mali talks about her new life and new family in Australia, but the Holocaust is never far away. She's unable to join her family on that quintessential Australian pastime, a visit to the beach. In her testimony, she says that every nightmare was back, and they all came to my place and would go to the beach and come back, and I wouldn't go with them. I would go to the park nearby and wait for them, but I never went down to the beach. And I never went to holidays to the beach for a long time. The Holocaust stayed with Mali all her life. And we need to remember the Holocaust here because of Bono Wiener and Abe Goldberg, who, incarcerated in the Lodge Ghetto, buried 2 boxes of material, one of personal documents, one of the bureaucracy of the ghetto, an act of memory and an act of resistance. Returning to the site of the ghetto after they were liberated, they discovered only one of the boxes, the one that contained the ghetto bureaucracy. Bringing that material to Australia has been part of the collection of the Melbourne Holocaust Museum since the mid-1980s. And when students visit the museum, they analyse replicas of the documents. They then go up to the main exhibition and see the real thing. And if they are lucky enough to visit on a Tuesday, then they usually get to hear from Abe himself, 100 years young, one of the 2 men who collected the material and brought it to Australia, and hear first-hand accounts of his experiences. So we need to remember the Holocaust here because of Abe and Bono and Mali and the Glaziers are just some of the tens of thousands of survivors who came to Australia before, during and after the war. That Australia had the highest per capita population of Holocaust survivors anywhere in the world outside Israel. It is the story of people who live in our streets and in our communities. It is an Australian story. And so we need to remember the Holocaust here because it is an intimate part of our story, with the ability to unsettle our comforting national mythologies. And we need to do more to help Australians, whatever our background, whatever our experiences, to understand that despite no ash from the chimneys of Treblinka floating on an Australian wind, the Holocaust is our patch. Thank you.
Take a
Tell our story. Documenting the ghetto experience, the camp experience, the partisan life was made by some dedicated women. Their experience, perspective and emotion shines through their work. A 17-year-old skiffist, Chava Rosenfeld, in the Lodge Ghetto, wrote poetry, and later in her mind in Auschwitz, Sassel Work Camp and Bergen-Belsen. After emigrating to Canada, Chava wrote her masterwork, Der Baum von Leben, The Tree of Life, detailing her experience in the Lodge Ghetto. This is one of her first poems in Lodge Ghetto.
Zu die Churves von Lodge Ghetto, mit Mamakim. Von die Tiefenischen ruf ich dich, Lied von verschnittener Heim. Dort zwischen zerfäulter Pleuten und blinder Löcher suchst du dein eigenem Spur, wie ein verblondeter Hund, und heulst sich auf Bretter von zerschütterten Dächern, wie auf aschigen Geweb von ihr Dor, an einsamer Spinn. Dort weinst du herein in a vertrugenden Brunnen, wie auf a Mammes Teuterbrust, a lechzende Kind. Und jammerst heraus von einem zerfallenen Käumen, also klogedig und wiest, wie ein basäulemdicker Wind. Dort klimperst du in nackte zerspoltene Scheiben, wie in Umkrumgezitter a herbstige Flieg. Und heudest sich mit dem Groß auf choreve Steiner, wie der Nischome über a Käfer, wie der Schiene über a Wieg. Du heilig Lied von chorever Heim. Dort wogelst du durch Gassen, wiest du nacket und rufst von jeder Schmatte, jeder Stein, dein stumm Geruf von Memakim.
Rochel Orbach was a gifted young writer and philosophy student from Lvov, who courageously helped Emanuel Ringelblum compile and then bury the Oneg Shabbos group's archive. After the war, Orbach returned to Warsaw, where she helped to recover the objects that she had buried, and later she wrote Yizkor.
There was no power on earth, no calamity that could interfere with their quarrelsome presence in that Jewish street, until the day became a day of curses, a day that was entirely night. The first to be rounded up were the beggars. Then the unemployed and the homeless were gathered up from the streets. They were loaded into wagons on the first morning of the deportations and driven through the town. They cried bitterly and stretched their hands out in despair, or wrung their hands, or covered their faces. The youngest of them sobbed, "Mother, mother, mame, mame." The sobs of despair died down in the town and there was silence. Later on, there were no more cries to be heard, except when women were caught and loaded onto the wagons, and one could hear an occasional indrawn hiss, such as a chicken would make as it is carried to the slaughter. Men, for the most part, were silent. Even the children were so petrified that they seldom cried. Once the beggars were rounded up, there was no further singing in the ghetto. I heard singing only once more after the deportations began. Enough, enough, I have to stop writing. No, I can't stop. I remember another girl of 14, my own brother's orphan daughter in Lemberg, whom I carried about in my arms as if she were my own child. Lucie, and another Lucie, older than she, one of my cousins who was studying in Lemberg and who was like a sister to me. And Lonye, my brother's widow, the mother of the first Lucie and Mundek, an older child of hers whom I thought as my own son from the time that he was orphaned. And another girl in the family, a pianist of 13, my talented little cousin Yosima.
In remembrance of her father, Chava Rosenfeld wrote the poem Tate in 1945.
Ich bin heint aufgestanden in der Früh, mit dem Tam von deinem Namen auf die Lippen. Hab der fehlt das Wort und dem Glied von dem Lied. Hab verstanden, schön genug. Jetzt ist Zeit zu verlassen, die sei wie heute Sonne für mein Tag. Und die zaplendige Freude versammeln mit mein Klog. Tate, ich bin heut aufgestanden in dem Morgen mit ausgeruhten Blicken zu dem Tag. In Herzen ergens wieder schon verborgen, ein neuer, aufgeblühter Sod. Bist du gekommen mit einem Schotten entgegen zu mein Sonnenbegold Gesicht und hast gerufen mit triebe gute Augen, Tochter, gib mir ab mein Licht. Hast du herausgerissen alle Bäume und die Großen unter meine Tritt, hast zertrieft auf alle Steine dem Glieder von dein teuten Blut. Tate, heiße seine meine Nacht und tief wie Zitter von mein jungen Leib. Hast du verschnitten mir das Gesang von Leben und angebracht das Gesang von Tod. Und hast du siehst das Bräut, was ich krei, doch werkst du mich mit jedem Bissen. Du beißt dich ein mit Hunger in mein Freit, du beißt dich ein in jeden mein Vergessen. Nur hab kein Meure, es ist der Sam mir süßer wie der Jontef-Honig. Ich zitter über ihm und säug die Tropens von der Monnen. Nur hab kein Meure, hat's tut weh, wenn kommst und peugst mir in dem Herzen. Doch heilig süß ist jeder Pein, hat's eingehielt ist in Schwarzen. Weil sei, wie weiß ich tate, Wuch soll heint nicht spannen, ist es der eule Regelweg zu dir. Von wannen soll meine Tritt nicht kommen, kommen sei von dir, von dir. In aller Luften heucht dein Atem, in aller Erden ruht dein heilig Leib, und alle Tag und Nacht geht auf dein Schotten und stäubt mit Ummert auf mein Freit. Weil keinmal Klagelieder nicht singen auf dein Käfer. Es wird Käfer deins mir sein, der überall. Und ich weiß nicht, wo's liegt dein Gebein und Ewer, weil ich beweinen jeder Berg und Tal. Und hast viel keinmal deine Finger nicht fielen auf mein heißen Meidelkopf. Und du wirst mehr mit Wörter Stille nicht aufmachen, dem Weg zu Gott. Doch will ich tate mit dir spannen. Dein Nigen wird mir brummen im Begleit. Und ob ich will Heiligkeit nirgendwo gefunden, will mich bringen zu sei deine Taterei.
Finster
There were many brave women who fought against the Nazis. Zivia Lubekin, Tobche Davidovica, Miriam Feiner, Isa Big, Heike Grossman and Vladka Mead, to name a few. Two brave fighters, couriers, Heike Grossman and Vladka Mead, undertook heroic actions. Both survived and wrote and told of their experiences. Vladka was born Fagela Peltor in Warsaw on December 29, 1921, the oldest of 3 children. Her family was lower middle class, close-knit and traditional. They observed the Sabbath and Jewish customs but were not very religious. Vladka was a member of the Jugendbund Zukunft organisation. It is dawn. A young woman with her 2 comrades sneaks into an alley near the ghetto wall known to be a smuggling area where the police and factory foreman can be bribed. Barely out of her teens, she is dressed like a shopkeeper to evade suspicion. She approaches the foreman in charge of the ladder that is ready for smugglers to get over the wall. She is carrying a parcel that looks like a package of food, but it is actually something else.
We were each carrying a small 5-kilo package of dynamite, put in greasy paper to look like we were smuggling butter. It was best for those on the Aryan side of the ghetto to think we were just bringing in food. Usually, a smuggler had to pay a few groschen to a lookout, the foreman. We urgently need to get back into the ghetto. I called out, Miatek. He was the foreman that day and controller of the ladder. Miatek answered, I am here, what do you want? We need to get over the wall, now. Have you got the money? We have got the money. He started counting it. Hurry up, we are sitting ducks. The ladder went up against the ghetto wall. And so, the 3 of us got ready to climb. 2 of us successfully mounted the wall. I was next, and I handed the money over to the foreman. Cautiously, I went up the ladder with my package. It was not suspicious for them. When I was on top of the wall, the shooting started. The shooting became closer to our position. In desperation, the foreman snatched away the ladder. I was not able to go back to the Polish side. I couldn't see anybody on the Jewish side. Afraid to jump, not knowing too much about dynamite, I froze. The shooting came closer, and I was sure that I was done. But suddenly, the 2 people who were waiting for me saw me there on top. They made a human ladder from the ghetto side and brought me down, and we ran away just in time.
Dort, auf jener Seite ist die Freiheit. Setzt sie von der Weit durch die Trotten. Dort, auf jener Seite, der Freier nimm. Dort läuft die Zeit. Dort leben Menschen freier.
Bruder, nimm meine Hand. Heraufhängen. Bruder, kein dein Brot mit die Zähne und nicht gucke hin, mehr herüber. Sieh einfach da drin, dorten. Lieber Bruder meiner.
Vergess an dem, vergess und kein dein Wissen, und trink dein Pein und fress, und hast der Kischen, leg dein schweren Kopf, dein Mitten, rollen dir in Schlaf, dort zu schmieden dir dein Freiheit.
Heike Grossman was born in Bialystok in 1919 and was a leader in Hashomer Hatzair. She led many underground groups and finally fought in the Bialystok Ghetto Uprising in August 1943.
I was born in Bialystok and as a member of Hashomer Hatzair began to organise the movement's activities. When the war broke out, I moved to Vilnius and immediately became involved in the underground Hatzair leadership. The Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 forced me to return to Bialystok to check on my family and friends. After the leaders there learnt of my experience in Vilnius, I became involved with the underground movement in the Bialystok Ghetto. Forged papers enabled me to pass the poll. My name became Helena Voronowitz. This made it easy to travel as a courier between Vilnius, Lublin and Warsaw.
I also visited numerous Polish and Lithuanian towns, passing information between the various underground and partisan organisations. I loved the forests and felt safe traversing them, especially when together with Autobus, we smuggled arms into the ghettos. Finally, summoned back to Bialystok in May 1943, I established an underground fighting unit. There were about 500 of us, using rifles, pistols and grenades that had been smuggled in. After learning that the next deportation was to occur on August 16th, Mordechai Tenenbaum, who carried the only machine gun, began the ghetto uprising. Despite the resistance fighting, the SS managed to deport some 10,000 onto trains. I learned later that they were destined for Treblinka, Majdanek and Auschwitz. Sadly, 1,200 children were first sent to Theresienstadt and later Auschwitz. After several days of combat, many of our comrades fell, and some committed suicide rather than fall into the hands of the Nazi SS. About 40 of us battle-weary remnants managed to break through and run to the Kizhinin forest, where we joined partisan units of the Armia Krajowa, the Polish Home Army.
In a Lied wie Staffelweit steht der Stiefel oder Seid. Durch ein Fenster nicht kein Kreuz, gucken Kinder nach heraus. Jünger lach mit flinker Cap, Mädel lach mit blonder Zerb. Und zusammen dort mit Zehn gucken Augen schwarze Zwein. Schwarze Augen voll mit Tränen, hat ein Näsere a Klein. Lieber lach zum Kuschen da, stark gelockte schwarze Haar. So hat die Mama ihm gebracht, eingewickelt in der Nacht. Stark gekuscht ihm und geklopft, stiller Hey zu ihm gesagt. Doch mein Kind wird sei dein Ort, herrsche zu dein Mammes Wort. Ich behalt dich dort erfahr, war dein Leben dort Gefahr. Mit die Kinder spiel dich fein, stille Gehorsam sollst du sein. Mehr kein jüdisch Wort, kein Lied, weil du bist nicht mehr kein Jid. Wird sich stark das Kind bei ihr, Mama, ich will nur sein mit dir. Lass nicht über mich allein, das Kind vergeht sich im Geweih. Geht sie kuschen immer Sach, ob es hilft dir nicht kein Sach. Das Kind noch teinet, nein und nein, ich will nicht bleiben da allein. In die Ohren slemmt sie und mit Weichkeit in ihr Stehen singt sie Ingele, du mein, und sie winkt immer so ein. Nach dem Wind sie frei sich aus und sie trat von Stuberhaus, angefüllt mit Sorg und Schreck. Und sie geht in Nacht weg. Kalt in Treus und unerwähnt, hört Kohl sich oi, mein Kind. Dich gelost, oi fremde Hand, anders hab ich nicht gekannt. Geht a Mama mit sich red, und in Dreußen kalt und spät. Sweit in Pony in der Wind, Gott beschützt mein einzig Kind. Fremde Stub mit Menschen viel, Singele ist stumm und still. Red nicht, bet nicht, will kein Sach, selten wenn tut lach, nicht kein Tag, nicht kein Nacht, nicht schlaft und nicht erwacht. Was il Chor an Nomen fremd, auf sein Herz unterliegt und klemmt. Mame vogelt vor wie ihr Jossele euch stu. Keine weiß nicht, keine macht, und sie wart und wart und wart. Zu Jochevet ist sie gleich, weil wie Moishe auf den Teich erlet einsam auf den Wind, ist verlost ihr einzig Kind.
Schools and education were maintained with vigour and innovation in the ghetto. Two women, Luba Bielitska-Blum, a nurse, and Rosa Eichner, a teacher, were shining examples of courage and leadership who helped build morale and hope for the children. Rosa Eichner, a Bund and YAF activist and a Lodge city councillor, was arrested in September 1939, tortured for 3 months and eventually released. Her body broken, but not her spirit, she found her way to Warsaw and the Medem Sanatorium. Luba Bielitska-Blum was born in Vilna in 1905. She, together with her husband, were members of the Jugendbund Zukunft. Luba eventually chose nursing as her profession and, after gaining experience, became a teacher of nursing, specialising in home care and social medicine.
Abrasha and I moved to Warsaw, and I became director of the Nurses' College at the Jewish Hospital on Schuster Street. I particularly liked working in the YAF, the Jewish Working Women's Organisation, an offshoot of the Bund, teaching young women about their rights and, of course, nursing and health. Together with my husband Abrasha, we became very active in the Bund. In the first days of the war, our flat was bombed. I rescued our children and moved to another apartment. My husband was one of the Bundists who helped organise the GOB, the Jewish Defence Organisation. He was a strong believer in organising a revolt. Under the Nazi occupation, I continued to run the nurses' school in the ghetto near the Umschlagplatz. The nurses and I actively played a role in saving as many children from being deported. We saved sick children and the elderly from the Nazis by at least ensuring them a quiet death in a clean hospital. I hid our children in the hospital attic until only a few days before the uprising, when we were smuggled out to the Aryan side. Abrasha stayed and fought in the uprising and continued to send me reports about the fight. He eventually escaped through the sewers and joined a partisan group in the Kompinos forest. He returned to Warsaw to assume Bund responsibilities and helped organise the underground fighters. Vladka later told me that she had hidden Abrasha in a bunker and helped to restore his health. Vladka said that they were discovered and that by tying bedsheets together, she, Vladka, had managed to escape, but Abrasha fell and had broken both his legs and became a victim of the Gestapo. After the war, I remained in Warsaw to run the children's orphanage in Otwock, and became a mother to hundreds of Jewish children returning from their hiding places, the camps and partisan groups.
Mit Lattes auf Leiber, zerschnittenen Passen, betreibt uns im Ghetto, es gehen die Gassen. In Tfilin wie Kronen marschieren diese Keinem, a Kelvele geht mit a Dorfs jeden einem.
Und zwischen sie alle, die Lehlen Mele, a Kind auf viel allem, a Gilden erlebt. A Kind für allem beim Hentel a Zweiten. Arum die Talmidim begleiten.
Me jogt über Churves, an Brot und an Feier.
Das Brot ist a Buch und das Licht ist a Bleier. Versammelt die Kinder in hohe Wette. Es lernt sie weiter, die Lehrerin Mire. Sie lehnt sie Shalom Aleichem Meise. Es blinken die Kinder und lachen besmeise. Sie flecht sie mit Loinkes, denkes die Zepplach. Und zählt ihr Vermög 130 die Keplach. Zugleich mit der Sonne ist die Lehrerin Mire, schon wach und sie wartet auf die Kinderlach ihre.
Sie kommen, sie zählt. Oh, nicht zählen sie besser. Durch Nacht hat es 20 verschnitten am Messer.
Verbeißt sie ihr Lieb und mit Quore beneitel. Dort seht sie von Leckerten, muntert sie weiter. Gekommen der Lehrer, gell stehen, mir wird singen, der Hol soll Liebe, die Mäuerin klingen.
Schon 60 verblieben, an Schwester, an Mammen. Die Lehrerin Mire ist alle zusammen.
Sis nonta Jontef, ist Hebelach Kinder. A Vorstellung darf mir beweisen geschwinder.
Zum Jontef nicht da mehr wie 40.
No itlach mit weißenken Händel, mit lichtiger Trittlach. Die Biene ist frisch mit der Sonne, mit der Golden. Man kann als im Teichel sich ausbaden dolten. Beim Leinen Peretzes, dritte Matone, hat uns Herr gesagt, dass dabei dieser kommen.
Sie haben gehabt und Vertrag ist geblieben. Von 130, bloß Mire und 7.
My parents named me Raisela. I was 21 when I became a messenger for the Bund Central Committee and moved to Lodge, where I met my future husband, Yankev Achna. I enjoyed my activities, helping to organize the Yiddish schools, the YAF, Bund's Women's Organization, and the SCIF organization. I was proud to become a Lodge city councillor on the socialist ticket and travelled to many towns speaking about women's rights and workers' issues. Being a Lodge city councillor on September 1st, I had a Nazi target on my back. We held a Bund Central Committee meeting in our flat, deciding which Chaverim would remain in the Lodge and who would go to East to rescue themselves and maintain the party's work. I was arrested shortly afterwards and was beaten several times. This I endured for 3 months, and eventually I was released along with a group of prostitutes. My body was broken, but not my spirit. I left for Warsaw with my 2 children, Janek and Mirka, who was a trained nurse. Because of her training, we were sent to Mergenche, to the Merdem Sanatorium. We were happy there, helping the 100 or so children to learn and grow. Despite the circumstances, we instilled in them a pride and therefore a feeling of resistance. The night of the 22nd of August, the Gestapo came and marched us to the station. We all sang to the children, tried all means to comfort them, to take the fear away. Several of the older children ran into the forest and escaped. I refused to leave the younger ones, continually singing those songs we loved. My children and I travelled with them on the train to Treblinka.
Dr. Anna Breuder-Heller became a doctor having graduated from medical school in Zurich and Berlin. Specialising in children's disease, she returned to Warsaw and became active in the Bund. As a capable organiser, she helped found the Kinderfreund Society, consulted to the Yiddish sister school, and became the chair of the management committee of the Medem Sanatorium, and consulted in various Warsaw hospitals. During the bombing of Warsaw and Ghetto period, she continued her work in hospitals. She died in the Ghetto Uprising, caring for fellow fallen comrades.
While the bombs were falling, I managed to remain calm. I tried to comfort the children in the Bersen and Baumann Jewish Children's Hospital, telling them stories. I had falsified records and disobeyed the Nazis' inhuman orders as much as I could. Once, a Nazi held a gun at my back while I was doing my rounds. Every child's death brought me to tears. I permitted all doctors and staff to eat a communal breakfast served on fine china and drink from crystal glasses. We had 100 grams of thinly sliced bread, 10 grams of beetroot marmalade, 5 grams of monkey lard, and a 25-gram glass of undiluted spirits. We later realised our relative well-being was due to the calorific value of alcohol. I was always impressed by the commitment of one of our orderlies, Marek Edelman. A hospital we had set up in Leshno Street began accepting young child couriers who were shot by the Nazis who were trying to smuggle food into the ghetto. During the deportations, we had to relocate the hospital to Stuyvesant Street, near the Umschlagplatz. It became impossible to do our job, and some beds had 3 or 4 young patients in them. Bernard Goldstein, the Bund security expert, offered to smuggle me out of the ghetto. I refused. I wanted to help our fighters in the impending uprising that was being planned. I nursed many wounded comrades in the first days of the uprising. Their courage always gave me hope.
Lass mich endigen mein Lied, was angehäuben hat die Mame bei mein Wiegele, und halbe Nacht, zerbrochen, schwach und müde, gewickt, verwickt mir mit der golden Siegele.
Lass mich endigen mein Lied, mit was hab angehäuben, sich zu weisen, mit nicht sichere, mit Erstetritt, noch Dalton zwischen Amcho, Scherm und Eisen.
Das Lied von Aufkommen und von Umkommen. Das Lied, was meine Brüder haben euch im Ghetto es gesungen. Und im Kampf nicht losen dir sich lebendig begraben.
Lass mich endigen auf Mama loschen, Jiddisch. Das gekurlte Gesang von jener Tag. Wenn Gefangener beim Tod hat ausgeschrien, sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst, den letzten Weg.